So, I want you to imagine just for a second that we can step completely outside of our current reality. We're going to time travel a bit.
Okay, I like where this is going.
We're going back to a quiet Monday night. It is May 9th, 1966.
Right.
We are in Elmira, New York. It's exactly 9 p.m. The air is cool, maybe a little damp, which is pretty typical for upstate New York in spring.
Definitely.
And we're walking into a living room, and the vibe in this, well, the vibe is really hard to pin down.
It's a very specific atmosphere.
Yeah, it's domestic, it's cozy. There's probably the smell of stale cigarette smoke and maybe coffee brewing.
Very 1960s working class writer household.
Exactly. But underneath that very ordinary domestic layer, something electric is happening, something deeply, deeply strange.
It really creates quite the picture, doesn't it? Because we are stepping into the workspace of a husband and wife. But we aren't just visiting them for a casual chat.
No, we are definitely not.
We are essentially eavesdropping on a direct conversation with a non-physical entity, an entity known as Seth.
Which is just wild to think about. And tonight, we are cracking open a very specific file from this archive.
A fascinating one.
We are looking at session 257 of the early sessions, book 6 of the Seth Material, recorded, as I said, on May 9th, 1966.
That's the one.
Now, before we get too deep into the weirdness, and trust me, it gets really weird today, I need to make sure we're all on the same page legally and ethically.
Always a good idea.
So just a quick mandatory disclaimer for you all. This deep dive is distributed completely free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Right.
We are here to learn, to explore, and, maybe get our minds blown a little bit.
And the mission for this deep dive is just so fascinating because session 257 isn't just one thing. It's this incredible mosaic of ideas.
Yeah, it jumps around a lot.
It does.
Yeah.
We aren't just reading a dry transcript of a ghost story here. We're going to be analyzing the very nature of consciousness itself.
And time. Don't forget time.
Oh, absolutely, the nature of time. But, and I think this is really why this material has endured for so many decades, we're also going to get some unsolicited family therapy.
Which is frankly hilarious. I mean, you sit down expecting the secrets of the universe, and you get in-law drama.
It is surprisingly funny. The tone shifts are incredible. And then, right after that, we pivot to something genuinely chilling.
The envelope thing.
Yes, a very rigorous test of clairvoyance known as the envelope experiment.
That part, honestly, when I was reading the source material for that section, the hair on my arms actually stood up.
It's compelling data.
It's the kind of thing that makes you just look around the room and wonder if reality is actually what you think it is.
It certainly challenges the standard materialist view of the world. I mean, we have Seth offering gossip about in-laws, then deep metaphysical truths, and then describing a diagram hidden inside a sealed double envelope.
An envelope that literally no one, not even the people in the room, had actually seen with their physical eyes.
Exactly. It's a full itinerary for one evening.
So we have a ghost who gossips, teaches philosophy, and reads sealed letters. That is a heck of a Monday night.
It really is.
Let's just jump right into the deep end then. Section 1. The nature of existence.
Let's do it.
Because Seth doesn't waste any time in this session. He opens with this absolute bombshell statement.
He really sets the stage.
He says, and I'm quoting directly here, quote, "The basis of all life can be loosely termed intuitional. Obviously, the intellect is not necessary for life." End quote.
That is just a profound way to start a conversation.
It's heavy.
Obviously, the intellect is not necessary for life. Think about that. In our modern world, and certainly in the Western world, we prize the intellect above almost everything else.
Right. I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. Descartes.
Yeah.
But Seth is flipping that completely on its head immediately. He's suggesting that the core spark, the actual thing that animates us, isn't the thinking, logical brain at all.
It's intuition.
Yes.
It's intuitional.
It's almost like saying the engine of the car isn't the steering wheel. That's a really good analogy. The intellect might steer, it might categorize things, it might make maps of the territory, but it doesn't actually provide the fuel.
The spark.
The fuel is intuitional. Think about the natural world for a second. A tree doesn't think about growing leaves.
Right. It just does it.
A cell doesn't consult an instruction manual to divide. It operates on a direct, intuitional knowing. And Seth is reminding us that we are part of that exact same system.
Even if our egos try to convince us that we're the ones running the show with our logic and our spreadsheets.
Exactly. The ego takes the credit, but the intuition does the living.
And he follows this up with a discussion on time that is frankly equally disorienting for our linear brains.
The tying stuff is always a trip.
He states, quote, all existence is present.
All existence is present.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I feel like I know what those words mean individually, but you put them together and my brain just starts to hurt.
It's the concept of simultaneous time, or what Seth often refers to as the spacious present.
Yes, spacious present.
Oh, yeah. We perceive time as a river, right? Flowing from the past through the present and into the future.
Yeah, that's how it feels.
But Seth argues that this is an illusion. It's a construction. He actually says, quote, you simply invented a continual time system as a vehicle of perception for the ego.
Wait, so time is just a tool, like a pair of glasses we put on?
Precisely. It's a filtering mechanism. Imagine you are standing in a massive, sprawling art gallery.
Okay, I'm in the gallery.
All the paintings are hanging on the walls simultaneously. You can walk from the Renaissance room over to the modern art room.
Right?
Now, just because you are currently looking at a Picasso doesn't mean the Da Vinci in the other room has ceased to exist.
Or that it's in the past.
Right. And it doesn't mean the Warhol in the next room hasn't been painted yet. They're all there right now.
That's a great way to picture it.
But our ego, our conscious focus in this physical reality, is like wearing blinders. We can only look at one painting at a time, so we just assume they are happening in a sequence.
That is a wild thought. So past incarnations, if we talk about reincarnation for a second, they aren't actually back then.
Right on.
They are happening right now, just in a different room of the gallery.
According to Seth, yes. All your various selves are operating simultaneously.
That's so hard to grasp.
We just focus on this one specific life, this one Monday night in 1966, or this one exact moment listening to a deep dive, because that's how our ego has to navigate physical reality.
It filters out the rest of the noise so we can actually function without getting overwhelmed.
Exactly. If you saw all the paintings at once, you couldn't focus on the brushstrokes of the one right in front of you.
Speaking of navigating reality, the host for Seth Jane had a question for him in this session.
Yes, she did.
She wanted to know if Seth dreams.
It's a very human question to ask. We dream every night, so we naturally assume other forms of consciousness dream too.
It's a way of relating to him.
And Seth's answer was a pretty hard no.
Well, a qualified no.
True.
He says, quote, I do not dream of Ruburt, which, just as a reminder, is his specific name for Jane.
Right. His male name for her larger entity.
He says, I do not dream of Ruburt because I do not dream at all, in the same terms that you do.
He's drawing a distinction in mechanics.
I just thought he was too cool to dream.
I don't think it's about being cool. It's really about the mechanics of focus. He explains that human dreaming heavily involves visual images.
Like movies in our heads.
Yes. We create these little movies to process daily data or emotional baggage. Seth doesn't use visual images in that way. He says he switches the focus of attention.
Okay, help me out here. How is switching focus actually different from what we do when we dream?
Think about it like physical travel. Seth uses the analogy of moving from one physical country to another.
Okay.
When you travel from France to Spain, you aren't dreaming of Spain. You are physically relocating your awareness and your body to that new location.
You're just there.
Right. Seth visits different states of consciousness with conscious intent. He doesn't drift off into a REM cycle and hallucinate.
He packs his bags, metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. He packs his bags and intentionally goes to a different dimension.
That makes him sound like some kind of multi-dimensional tourist.
In a way, he is an explorer. The key difference is he maintains his I-ness, his core sense of self, while shifting environments.
Whereas we usually forget who we are when we dream.
Right. When we sleep, we often lose that rigorous waking sense of self and just get swept away by the bizarre imagery.
But here is the part that I found truly fascinating and honestly perhaps a little unsettling.
The connection back to us.
Yes. Seth claims that while he doesn't dream of us, we actually dream of him.
It implies a sort of one-way mirror in our consciousness.
He says humans do contact him in dreams, they just don't remember it consciously when they wake up.
His exact phrase is, quote, "We simply speak to each other, but he does not remember what has been said consciously."
I just love the idea that I might be having these high-level metaphysical summits with a multi-dimensional entity at 3 in the morning.
You very well might be.
And then I wake up and I'm just like, man, I really want a bagel.
It perfectly highlights the massive disconnect between our waking self and our deeper dreaming self.
He really does.
We might be vastly more knowledgeable and connected when we are asleep, but the ego, with its time blinders firmly in place, filters all that profound data out when we wake up.
Leaving us with just fragments.
Fragments, nonsense images, or just an urge for a bagel.
So we're basically living double lives.
At least double, maybe triple or quadruple if we consider the whole art gallery analogy from earlier.
All right, so we've established that time is an illusion, Seth is an insomniac interdimensional traveler, and we're all completely forgetting our nightly meetings with him.
Heavy paradigm-shifting stuff.
Very heavy stuff. But then right in the middle of this session, things take a turn.
A very sharp, very unexpected turn.
It goes straight from high philosophy to gossip.
It really does. It's jarring but fascinating.
I call this section Seth the family therapist.
A fitting title.
Because out of nowhere, he starts making what he calls minor remarks about Rob's family. And honestly, Seth is kind of catty here.
He can be quite blunt. You have to remember, he doesn't have the social filters or politeness protocols that we have.
Clearly not.
He just sees the energy patterns, and he comments on them directly.
So he brings up Rob's brother's wife. And just listen to this quote. He says, quote, "Your brother's wife was a baker's daughter and still has the habit of overindulging in food."
Ouch.
I know. I mean, imagine you're channeling a spirit from beyond the veil, sitting in your living room in a trance.
Hoping for cosmic wisdom.
Right, and he shows up just to tell you your sister-in-law eats too many donuts because her dad was a baker.
It is. Humorous. But it also shows that Seth is closely observing the psychological patterns of the people around Jane and Rob.
He's paying attention to the mundane stuff.
Exactly. He views that behavior, the overindulging, as a deeply rooted habit from her childhood environment. He sees the cause and the effect very clearly.
So he's not judging her.
No, he isn't judging her moral character at all. He is simply diagnosing a behavioral loop based on her past.
It's the specificity that kills me, though. A baker's daughter. It's so aggressively mundane.
It grounds the material.
It does. But then he moves on to Rob's mother, and the analysis gets a lot deeper and, frankly, a lot darker.
Yes, this part is a profound piece of psychoanalysis. He talks about the dynamic where the elderly mother constantly asks her grown sons for help.
Which, on the surface, sounds totally normal.
Right. An elderly parent needs help with things around the house. We should obviously help our parents.
But Seth peels back the layer of motivation there.
He does. He points out she's not asking for help because she actually needs the physical assistance.
He says, quote, "This asking for help represents a need for reassurance that she has indeed been a good parent."
She's testing them. The internal logic she's using is, if they did not love me, they would not help me.
That is so relatable. I think almost everyone listening knows someone who operates exactly like that.
It's a very common form of transactional affection.
Transactional affection. I need you to perform a service so I can feel validated as a human being.
It is. But Seth takes it a step further into the family system. He points out a triangulation dynamic happening with the father.
The revenge angle.
Yes. He says that when the sons come over to help the mother, she subtly holds it up against the father. It becomes an emotional weapon in the house.
Like, look, the boys are helping me, not you.
Exactly.
And then Seth drops this incredible line, quote, "This is also a type of revenge, for the mother is now in a stronger position after having been kept in an inferior position for nearly a lifetime."
That is a striking, really piercing insight into the gender dynamics of that specific generation.
It really is. He's acknowledging that she felt powerless. She felt inferior for decades in that marriage.
And now that the sons are grown men, she's using their loyalty to finally get some leverage over her husband.
It's tragic, really, when you break it down like that.
It's a sad power struggle played out through totally mundane requests for household chores or financial aid.
And Seth, looking at this from a completely non-physical perspective, doesn't judge it as sinful or evil.
No, he just dissects it like a mechanic looking at an engine. He lays out the mechanics of the emotional manipulation.
It's kind of a dark humor, in a way. Even from a cosmic, multidimensional perspective, family drama is universally recognizable.
Human nature is human nature.
You can leave your physical body, ascend to a higher plane of existence, and you're still going to have to deal with your mother-in-law's passive-aggressive need for validation.
It really seems that relationships are the primary teaching ground, no matter what level of consciousness you happen to be on.
Okay, so we've done the high metaphysics, we've done the family gossip. Now let's travel back in time.
Or sideways in time, as we discussed.
Right, sideways in the gallery. Let's travel sideways to Boston.
Ah, the Boston incarnations. This is a very prominent, recurring theme in the early sessions.
It comes up a lot.
It does. Seth often discusses a past life that Jane and Rob shared in Boston sometime in the 19th century, right around the pre-Civil War era.
And the detail he gives here is just so granular. It's not the typical past life regression stuff where you find out you were Cleopatra and he was Mark Antony.
No, it's never royalty with Seth.
It's extremely specific, almost boring, unglamorous stuff.
Which, in my opinion, strongly adds to the credibility of the material. Grandiose claims are easy to make up.
Right.
Boring, logistical, architectural claims are much harder to fake because, honestly, why would you bother?
Exactly. Why make up being a guy with a bad eye? Because Seth tells Rob that in this Boston life, he was a minister. But not just any minister, a minister with a, quote, bad left eye.
And what's fascinating is that Jane actually worries about this specific piece of data right during the session.
She comes out of trance a bit.
She pauses the delivery. She worries that her own subconscious is distorting the information.
Yeah.
Because they have a real-life neighbor in Elmira, a Miss Callahan, who happens to have a bad eye.
So Jane thinks she's just bleeding her daily life into the channel.
She thinks her subconscious is just grabbing something familiar.
But Seth insists on it. He completely doubles down.
He does.
He says, no, the bad left eye is legitimate historical data. And then he starts dropping specific names to prove it.
Local Boston names.
He mentions a Grant building that was somehow connected to the church. He mentions a Gaylor family, Sarah and Oscar Gaylor.
He says they were rich members of the parish and they were buried nearby. It's incredibly specific data.
It feels testable.
If one were inclined to dig through old Boston parish records from the 1840s or 50s, these are exactly the kinds of clues you'd look for.
But the real gem of this entire section, the thing that actually made me laugh out loud when I read the transcript, is Jane's name in this past life.
Oh, yes. The name.
Are you ready for this?
Go ahead.
Her name was Nostracious Elmo.
Nostracious Elmo.
I mean, come on, that sounds like a spell from Harry Potter.
It's quite the mouthful.
Or like a Sesame Street character's eccentric grandfather, Nostracious Elmo.
It is a wildly peculiar name, and Seth literally spells it out during the session, so there's no confusion. N-O-S-T-R-A. Nostra. Nostracious. And Elmo is the surname.
And then he adds that she used a professional name as well.
Which hints at the backstory Seth had established in previous sessions, that Jane, or Nostracious, was a medium in that Boston life who perhaps misused her abilities for profit.
A bit of a fraud.
Or at least someone who embellished.
Yeah.
So Nostracious might have actually been a stage name, a created persona for her clients.
It certainly has a very theatrical ring to it.
Very dramatic.
The great Nostracious. But then, moving from the people to the actual real estate, Seth describes the neighborhood they lived in. And this is where the expert in you must really love the detail.
I do. The architectural timeline is fascinating.
He describes the gentrification and then the ultimate decline of their old house.
It's a brilliant sociological observation. He traces the entire life cycle of a single building in Boston.
Right.
First, he says it was the living quarters for the minister. Very respectable upper-middle-class dwelling. Then, as the years go by, he specifically mentions the era of 1870 to 1890. The front rooms of that house are converted into a barber shop.
A barber shop? Then a dress shop? Then a restaurant.
And finally, the entire neighborhood deteriorates, the old buildings are torn down, and new construction goes up.
It's literally the life cycle of a city block.
It anchors the reincarnation story in gritty physical reality. It's not just souls floating in the ether. It's tied to a physical building that smelled like hair tonic in 1880 and fried food in 1900.
It really makes you wonder about the building you're sitting in right now.
Who was there before you?
Yeah, what did they do in this exact spot? And according to Seth's theory of time, are they still doing it right now?
If all existence is present, then yes. That barber is still cutting hair in that front room, simultaneous to us recording this very deep dive.
Okay, my brain is doing that hurting thing again.
Yeah.
Let's move to the main event of the session.
The envelope experiment.
The chilling proof. Section 4. This is where things get undeniable.
This is the crux of the session's evidential value. This is where we move from interesting philosophy to actual measurable testing.
So set the stage for us. How did this envelope experiment actually work?
It was a fairly rigorous setup. Rob, Jane's husband, would select a target object.
And Jane wouldn't know what it was.
Correct. Jane was usually out of the room or completely unaware of what he was doing. Rob would take this object and seal it inside a double envelope.
Explain the double envelope.
He would put the object inside one opaque envelope, seal it, and then place that envelope inside a second opaque envelope and seal that one.
So absolutely no peeking.
Physically impossible to peek, even if Jane had tried. And usually Rob would pick something totally random, a utility bill, a quick sketch he did, a leaf from the yard.
Just mundane stuff.
Exactly. In this specific case, for what they call the 50-second experiment, he went into his art studio and literally fished something out of his trash can.
Literal garbage.
It was a discarded, crumpled page from a manuscript Jane was currently working on, a book she was calling her dream book.
Okay.
It was typed on yellow paper as part of Chapter 5. He folded it up, sealed it in the double envelopes, and sat down for the evening session.
And then Jane goes into her trance.
Jane goes into a trance, the entity Seth comes through, and he has to describe what is hidden inside that envelope on the table.
Okay. So we have a piece of yellow paper with some typing on it. What does Seth actually say?
He starts with broad visual impressions. He says, quote, "A framework that seems to be wooden with thin lines like poles."
A wooden framework with thin lines. Now, clearly looking at a piece of typed paper, that doesn't seem to fit at all.
At first glance, it sounds like a complete miss.
Yeah.
But Rob interprets this immediately during the session. He realizes that where Jane sits to write, the very spot where she physically typed that exact page, she directly faces a wall of studio windows. It's a glass-enclosed porch area. There are 5 tall windows, tall and narrow, with prominent wooden frames and small panes.
Thin lines like poles.
Exactly.
So Seth isn't just seeing the paper itself, he's seeing the physical environment where the paper was originally created.
That's a very common feature in psychic phenomena, specifically psychometry. The object carries the energetic memory of its creation.
So it's like a recording.
Seth is picking up the visual data of the studio windows that Jane was staring at while she typed the words.
Okay, that's cool, but it's a little interpretive, right? Like you could stretch that to fit. What else does he get?
He gets much more specific. Then Seth clearly says the word anemia.
Anemia, the medical condition. That's totally random.
It seems completely random. But in the manuscript chapter, the actual text written on the page hidden inside the envelope, Jane describes a dream had by a man named Ernfrid Anderson.
Okay.
Ernfrid's wife is a woman named Helga, and Helga, in real life, suffers from anemia.
Whoa, okay, so he's doing this intense associative linking.
Yes.
He goes from the physical paper to the typed text to the name in the text to the guy's wife to her specific medical condition.
Exactly. It's a chain of consciousness. But then we get the real aha moment, the hit that makes this particular session so famous in Seth circles.
I know which one you mean.
Seth describes, quote, a star shape, something round, again with spokes leading outward, but rather prominent.
A star shape. Now let's be clear. Was there a star drawn anywhere on that yellow paper in the envelope?
No. There was absolutely no drawing on the target paper.
So it's a miss.
You would certainly think so. But Jane, after the session is over, goes and looks at her writing notes in the studio.
Okay.
She had been working on Chapter 5. The page in the envelope was page 80 of the manuscript. But on the back of page 112, a page she was working on at the exact same time, sitting on the same desk, she had doodled a diagram.
A diagram of what?
It was a diagram representing the whole self. It was a circle, with straight lines radiating outward from it like spokes. A star shape.
So the drawing wasn't in the envelope at all. It was on a completely different piece of paper that was just nearby when the target object was being typed.
Yes, this is what parapsychologists call bleed-through.
Bleed-through.
Seth wasn't limited to the physical atoms trapped inside the paper envelope. He was tuning into the entire field of mental energy surrounding the creation of that document.
That is wild.
He saw the star diagram Jane had drawn on the other page because, energetically speaking, they were both part of the exact same event of writing that chapter.
It's like he was reading the entire mental file folder of the writing session, not just the single piece of paper Rob pulled out of the trash.
It strongly suggests that physical objects aren't just isolated things. They're permanently attached to the history and the specific thoughts present when they were made.
But wait, it actually gets better, or weirder, depending on how you look at it. There's the disheveled comment.
Yes, the emotional hit. Seth says, quote, connection with 4 people, one of them disheveled.
Disheveled, meaning messy, unkempt, frazzled.
The manuscript page in the envelope discusses a recurring childhood dream of Jane's, a very specific, highly emotional memory.
What happens in the dream?
In the dream, she is running to a playground looking for games that don't exist. She suddenly realizes she's terribly late for school, so she runs all the way to school, panting, sweating, panicking, and she arrives, and she uses this concept in the text, disheveled.
So he actually picked up on the specific emotional state being described in the text of the hidden paper.
Yes. The word disheveled perfectly encapsulates the intense anxiety and the physical sensation of that specific dream memory recorded on the page.
That is incredible precision. But the one hit that really truly breaks my brain is the TV screen.
Ah, yes. The time anomaly.
Walk us through this one slowly, because it's complicated.
Seth is describing the envelope's contents, and he says, quote, also a small screen.
A small screen, like a television.
Yes. Now, Jane initially saw absolutely no connection here.
Because there was no TV mentioned on the typed page.
Correct. And there was no TV in the room they were sitting in. It seemed like a clear miss.
Okay.
But 2 days after the session takes place, Jane is back at her desk rewriting that exact chapter.
2 days later.
She's working on the second draft of the text that was in the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
And in this brand new draft, she decides she needs to add an analogy to better explain a point.
And what does she write?
She writes a new paragraph using an analogy about a television screen.
Wait. She wrote the words television screen 2 days after Seth saw a small screen inside the envelope.
Yes. Seth accurately perceived the TV screen analogy that was fundamentally associated with that document, even though the analogy wouldn't be physically written down by Jane until 48 hours in the future.
This goes right back to section 1. All existence is present.
Exactly. This is the proof of the pudding.
It's all connected.
Seth, the first draft that was in the envelope and the second draft that would be written 2 days later, are existing simultaneously in the spacious present.
Mind blown.
When he tuned into the core concept of the chapter, he saw the TV screen analogy because, from his nonlinear perspective, it was already there.
That is just mind-bending. He saw a future edit of a text. It implies that the future is, in some very real way, already accessible to us.
It implies that our creative works, our choices, our entire timelines are infinitely more fluid and interconnected than we perceive with our daily ego.
The envelope didn't just contain a piece of old yellow paper.
No, it contained the past, the studio windows, it contained the present associations, Helga's anemia, and it contained the future edits, the TV screen.
It's like the paper was a hyperlink to all these other moments in time related to it.
That is actually a perfect description for our modern digital age.
Wow.
An object is a hyperlink to its entire history and its entire future.
So, man, what does this all mean for us? We started with a quiet Monday night in Elmira, and we've ended up completely questioning the linearity of time itself.
I think the biggest takeaway here is that our everyday definition of reality is just incredibly narrow.
It's just a sliver.
We live in this tiny box defined by our 5 physical senses and our strict linear perception of a ticking clock. Seth is basically knocking on the walls of that box, telling us there's a massive, boundless universe right outside.
A universe where we don't just dream, we travel between dimensions.
Right.
A world where our sisters-in-law are cosmically judged by the habits of their baker fathers.
A bit of humor to keep us grounded.
And a reality where a ghost in a living room can read a paragraph you haven't even thought of writing yet.
It really invites a deep sense of wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that we are so much more than we think we are.
It really does. It's comforting in a strange way to know that the story doesn't just go in one straight, boring direction.
And that we are never truly disconnected from the rest of our experience, whether we label it past or future.
Well, if your brain is buzzing right now as much as mine is, I highly, highly recommend you don't just take our word for any of this.
Please don't.
This deep dive is just the absolute tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely. The Seth material is vast. It's incredibly detailed. We're looking at just one single session out of hundreds and hundreds of them.
So we really want to give a huge credit to the source material here, which is the early sessions, and specifically the publisher, New Awareness Network.
They do vital work.
These guys have done all the heavy lifting of preserving this material, so we talk about it today.
If you want to study the books themselves, and you really should, because reading Seth's exact words directly is a very unique experience, you need to visit sethcenter.com/the-early sessions.
That's the place to go.
That's where you can find all the books and the bookstore. Go support the people who are keeping this incredible archive alive for all of us.
Seriously, go to sethcenter.com/the-early sessions. Buy a book. Read it.
You won't regret it.
Then try to fall asleep tonight knowing you might be attending a high-level metaphysical conference in your dreams.
And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. A question to carry with you throughout your week.
Ooh, let's hear it.
If Seth could clearly see a diagram Jane had drawn on a completely different page, and he could read a paragraph she hadn't even written yet, what parts of your future are already present right now? What parts of your future are just sitting in the room with you, waiting for you to catch up to them?
Man, that is deeply spooky, but I love it. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you in the next deep dive.
Yep.